The Mass is prayed or sung in Latin, the language of the Roman Empire in the early days of the Church. Why do we retain Latin, which is a dead language, as the official language of the Church? Vatican II, in the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy, says that the use of Latin is to be preserved in the Latin rites. Latin has been used in the rites of the Church since the 4th century. Latin acts as a common language between peoples of different tongues and thereby fosters unity among all Roman Catholics. It shows the universality of the Church. Latin is a sacred language associated with the singular purpose of the worship of God. When we pray the Mass in this language, we are connected with the generations who have worshipped before us. We are able to participate in this sacred liturgy because Pope Benedict XVI, in his apostolic letter Summorum Pontificum, declared that any priest in good standing with the Church can celebrate the extraordinary form of the Mass. The Mass is the most sublime act on earth. It is the highest prayer. Jesus Christ becomes present on the altar and offers himself to the Father for the salvation of the world. In the Mass, we relive that sacrifice and join our sacrifices to Christ. The sacrifice of Christ is not played out again as if we must crucify him over and over, but rather we enter into that one perfect moment in time on Calvary at each Mass. The very nature of the sacrificial act requires that there is a priest, someone ordained by God, to offer the oblation. The sacrificial priesthood was established at the Last Supper, when Christ told the apostles, "Do this in memory of me." Something often associated with the Latin Mass is the use of veils by women. This is a sign done out of respect for Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. It is not required by church law, but is an act which has great meaning when done intentionally and prayerfully. It comes from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, where he says, "But every woman praying or prophesying with her head not covered disgraces her head." Now, we do not hold to that literally. Rather, we recognize that the veil has been used to cover things that are holy or sacred. Moses covered his face with a veil after he saw God on Mount Sinai. It was said that his face glowed with light, and the people were afraid to come near him, and so he covered his face with a veil. Traditionally, the tabernacle is covered with a veil, signifying something holy and precious is present. If you want to wear a veil, do so without fear. Just do not wear it as a sign of your own holiness or for some other selfish reason. Traditionally, in the Latin Mass, there is also an altar rail. There's not one present in the cathedral church, but we use the step up into the sanctuary as the place where the rail used to be. The altar rail is where the faithful approach God to receive him in Holy Communion, and where the priest enters the sanctuary for the liturgy. Only the priest and the servers should enter the sanctuary during the liturgy. The cards on the altar contain many of the prayers that the priest prays while performing the complicated ceremonial actions during the Mass. The priest uses the Roman Missal, but at times, when his hands are busy holding something or doing some other action, the cards have the text that he can pray without interrupting the prayer of the Mass. At different moments during the Mass, you will sit, stand, or even kneel. Standing is a liturgical posture the early Christians used and is a symbol of joy. Kneeling is a sign of adoration and humility and is used during the most solemn moments of the liturgy. Sitting is a position that signifies meditation and listening, and thus is appropriately done during the readings and the homily. The primary purpose of the liturgy is to give honor to God. and so it is not necessary for the faithful to totally understand Latin. The Mass is a prayer to God first, and secondarily for the instruction of the people. You can follow along with a Latin-English missal in order to assist more fruitfully at Mass, but you are not required to say very many responses out loud. It is a contemplative prayer, whereby you participate by offering yourselves up in union with the priest, and thus your sacrifices are united with Christ and presented to the Father. It is the same in the Novus Ordo, but often you are able to make a more conscious offering when there are fewer things that you must say or do.